Okay.
Hey,
Hey,
hello. It's been a while. Good to see you.
yeah, good to see you too. Oh, it's almost the middle of 2025.
I
Time flies.
know.
I saw the the usual scary Twitter thing where it's like we're closer to 2050 now than we are 2000, and that's
Hi
the
guys.
limit.
What did it say?
We're closer to 2050 now. We're about to be closer to 2050 than we are in the year 2000 or something, I think. But
Oh,
yeah,
that
So
is
let's
scary.
wait. Where's Pascal?
Looks like you also got a haircut or like a beard trim.
Just let me ping all the others. Who's
I
on the
do
list?
the haircut as well. And then
Yeah, it's a season.
Okay. Seems like a chili cream Apollo meeting today.
Yeah.
Let me
Does
just
Pascal
get.
get a haircut as well?
Yeah, it's a while, but I mean,
don't
he's
have
also not.
I don't have any hair anymore.
Yeah.
So it's very dangerous for you, folks, when you work too long with Michael. Like you can check his brother. He also is completely bald. So it's very dangerous. When you work too much with him, then the hair just yeah.
pull it
Yeah,
out.
I've had weekly meetings. I think he
I
chose.
This will be amazing again when the AI summarizes this and the action item like never work with Michael if you like your hair.
Uh, okay, let's start. I think we are complete, right?
I think
Or
so.
is
Yep.
more refresh? No, okay. So hi everyone. Um, okay, let's get started. Is it sharing the right? No. Right. One more technique. Yeah. No. Okay. Before we get started, let me remind you that there is the specification, membership agreement, the participation guideline, and the code of conduct that we all agree to by attending in this meeting. So you can read up on these in the agenda. They are all linked there. Let's start with a quick round of introductions. I'm Michael Stipe.
I'm Martin from Apollo.
Pascal from Chili Cream.
I'm Derek from Polo.
I'm Sachin from Apollo.
And then we are complete.
Yep.
Okay, so we have two agenda items, or actually, agenda item 7 is a couple of discussions. Let's start with the first one, which is from Martin. And I can stop sharing, and then you can share if you want or not.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't really have anything prepared. And I literally mean revisit because
Yes.
as it turned out,
Then
like
let
I
me
was I was
share.
trying to like explain to someone sort of the design we came up with for field selection map, and in particular the decision to have explicit syntax for arrays. And it's still a design that I like, but I found it really hard to sort of explain the reasoning behind it. And I seem to remember we had some ambiguous cases in mind when we introduced
Yeah.
it, but I couldn't really remember them. And I asked Pascal, and I think he couldn't remember either. So it felt like a good topic to bring up again, um, just to sort of refresh our memory and see where we stand.
Yeah, and the thing was with the not the curly braces, but with the brackets.
These ones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we did so I've in the last week since you wrote me, I've discussed this with at least four or five people involved. And no one actually remember. I mean, we would have to watch it back, but I'm pretty sure that we had one case where we actually had ambiguity, but no one really remembers it. But it all boils down to the pipes in the lists, I think. Like when you start doing these things, then with just curly brackets, it would get really complicated, right?
I think it was this. This is how I remember it. That this case, if
You need
we
you need at least some kind of grouping. So parentheses might also work here. But
Yeah,
it is a
or-
good, yeah.
or double quotes, but I think it's not so clear what you mean here. Like from reading the syntax, it's not. Is it?
No,
is it-
I don't think you want double braces here because that
Yeah.
would be a nested object. So if anything else than arrays, I think you would need normal parentheses as sort of a just to disambiguate an expression similar to what you would do with, yeah.
Yeah. So
and I think we came up with because in many languages as an indexer you had the brackets, right?
also,
Yeah.
this is a problem because if you use arguments in the future, it's already
yeah.
used syntax.
Yeah.
That was
you're right.
that was
Yeah.
And it's a bit
And just to be clear, I really like the fact that we're explicit about arrays. And I think there are good reasons for doing that. Like even if it's not necessarily ambiguous, it makes it much more readable and understandable what the output structure is. The only issue is that it goes against the GraphQL selection set syntax,
yes.
which
I
processes
was-
arrays implicitly.
I was thinking about this also a bit, and I'm not sure because what do we describe here? We do not have clear output semantics and we do not have clear input semantics. It's actually a mix. It's a mapping between the output and the input. And in the input, we do have them. Like you can say that we have a variable and then we have an array and then a list of objects inside of it.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, this is part of the input because that indicates that we actually will have a list that is inputted somewhere. So
and that is true, Pascal. You're describing how the output side translates into a list for the input side.
yeah, and this is part of the input, not part of the output, because that means that you will have a list in the end. As soon as you have one of these parentheses, your type in your lookup needs to be, or in your parameter needs to be of a list type.
Sorry,
Yeah.
As soon as you see this immediately means you have a list.
And that is also the beauty. Like what we did in Fusion now is that we have two rewriters. One that just translates the syntax into output syntax. Then you just have a clean selection set. And the other one is an assignment syntax that you get to basically build the variable tree from it. And then you see that. Yeah, I think also, Pascal, this was really one of the decisions why we used the brackets, because we, like, when we designed that, we always designed it as a merge from the the literal syntax in GraphQL and the selection set.
Yeah. And it does sort of perform double duty. Like it's not just saying that like we're like constructing an array, we're also mapping over a path.
Yeah, it basically describes the requirements on the output side. So this is the data we require basically. But also this is how we transform it to inject it.
And I think like we don't have an example of this, I think, in the spec, but in theory, you could also like create an array out of elements, right? So for instance, if you have I don't know, phone number 1 and phone number 2 as separate fields, like you could
mean this?
create an array No, not that one. Like that's a mapping from from a list and like selecting a value
Yeah.
from each element. It's like a map.
Yeah.
What I mean is if you have two separate fields, like phone 1 and phone 2,
Yeah.
I think we would allow you to just put square brackets around it, like around the whole like thing, and just use that to create an array, right?
Yes, but I think these need to either be objects in this case.
No, it would implicitly be an object.
Really?
Yes,
No,
I
no,
mean,
no. I mean, it wouldn't have to be an object. Like, let's say phone 1 and phone 2 are both strings, right? No, I don't mean a union. I mean a list. So you want a
no,
list of phone numbers.
that
Oh no, we don't have that
that-
yet.
1 second, 1 second. Can you go back to the
But that's an
spec?
interesting.
No, go back to the spec. The syntax is already used. You're right. Sorry, no, I'm wrong. I thought that we leave away the curly brackets.
No,
No.
specifically not, and this is good because
That
now
could
we
be
could
volume.
introduce something like this
Yeah,
Yeah.
that could be a
where you can where maybe you have an ID or a skew. I don't know. For 1 and for 2, like where you basically want to build from two properties a list. Yeah.
Yeah.
And this
Or
actually
even
like
combine two lists with like spread syntax. Like there are extensions once you start thinking about like this in a composable way.
yeah, what we do for our current Fusion implementation, we started implementing a Fusion context. Basically, it looks ugly, but something like this. And with this, it could really be interesting, where you could say take the field and then add also here the other thing from the context. Things like
Yeah.
that. You could build lists from various things.
Yeah.
So this ties into a discussion that we actually have in the selected for later, is around white spacing. Should we do the same white spacing like we have in GraphQL? Because there was a question to have commas in there,
Yeah.
for readability or whatever. And if they are white spaces like in GraphQL, we don't care.
I've always felt the like the lexical structure of GraphQL was pretty weird because basically treating a comma like white space, like a skip token, means you can put it everywhere, right?
Yeah.
In theory, you can have like query comma comma comma.
Yeah, you can
parentheses
draw
open,
ASCII art with it.
yeah, like you can like fill your entire document with commas. And I find that I mean a bit awkward. But also I think you're right, like commas do serve a purpose in many cases to disambiguate expressions as well. Like a lot of the current syntax in GraphQL sort of just about works. But as soon as you start thinking about extensions, it breaks down.
So I'm not a fan of this because I'm more in the boat of, I understand your concerns with the commas. I also think it's weird. There were for sure great reasons for that to be in there. But I don't think we should deviate from this because we are still in the context of STL and we are still in the context of GraphQL, and a comma never had any value. And people are super surprised if you explain it to them when you say that they actually don't need to do any commas, even if they define arrays. So I think that it would be very strange if in the context of composite schema selection map, commas suddenly have any more semantics than being a white space.
I agree. Yeah. I mean the language it's embedded in, that's what decides this. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's why, like, what we should do is just allow it the same way in GraphQL. It's basically one sentence in the spec that that we use the same white spacing than the rest of the GraphQL syntax. I think we just have to restate it.
Yeah.
And then you can use commas, and we don't care.
I think that's sensible.
Just because we are already on the syntax discussion. But okay, this is a new case. We would need to encode in the syntax. At the moment, this wouldn't work. But because we designed it so strictly, like that, we demand that you specify objects like this, and they not just simply become objects.
Yeah.
This would be possible to say, okay, then this is a list. And this also, if you think from the input side in JSON and also in GraphQL value syntax, this is actually how you can do it as well there, right? Also with the variables and the mixing and stuff.
Yeah, no, this definitely makes sense to me. And this is another case of sort of where the explicit list syntax adds value.
Yeah.
Just there would be
I
no way
never
to
thought
express
about
this
this
otherwise.
But it would also allow you, right, to add constant values then.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. And
Yes.
you can even have like an array of objects if you wanted to. You can still create objects.
You know, I already see how this is going to be abused. Like you just have a parameter on your subgraph where you have an input from which other subgraph you you received you received.
Yeah,
this-
so the where I really see that is with context.
yeah, I agree.
Because this is actually awesome.
Yeah.
You
Okay,
can build up
so-
a context in your result tree as you build up your result tree. And then you can use that data here.
To finish off this discussion, do we all agree that we just keep it like this? Because as more and more implementation now start to appear before GraphQL Conf, if we would have a change in this syntax, then that would be pretty bad.
Yeah, yeah.
Not only that we have implemented it already this way, it's also that the graph-based implementation. I'm not sure how far you guys are with this on the Apollo side already, but
Not very far, to be honest. It's something I've only just started on.
okay.
But you're writing a VS Code language plugin.
Yeah, I mean that's a separate discussion, probably not for this venue, but let's catch up next week because I think there's an interesting angle there.
Yeah, I mean that is
Yeah.
crazy.
Chef skips.
Yeah, okay.
Okay,
So,
so
but so there are two action items that come out of this. So first, same white space.
Yeah.
Was as GraphQL. Then have we already constants in here, Pascal?
No, and I wouldn't add them.
Okay, because like Apollo in there requires can do constants as far as I know.
Yeah, and I think you sometimes need them like to pass them to fields as arguments. Like even something like a simple enum, for instance, deciding on like what kind of output you get from a field. Like the classic like Star Wars API has, I think, height. You can specify whether you want it returned in like meters or inches.
Then we have
Or feet, I guess.
Well, I just don't want to add more work before.
we can also say we put it in a 1.1 in.
I mean,
we
we
just-
still
we
have
just-
the whole interface object discussion and all these kind of things which are supported by Apollo at the moment, which we also have to cover. And interface object is definitely not something that we want to tackle in the first release because it just adds so much complexity. So
Yeah.
it could be that this is very simple, but again, I mean, this is 1-2 weeks of discussions to get all of the edge cases where this now fires back and so on. So I would rather
And
put it.
okay, but
You
for
can
version
create the
one,
action.
these
You can,
two is good, Pascal?
well,
Or
this creation syntax is not an action item. I mean, that's already.
No, but the new like literal like creating a list where
Yeah.
there was no list before.
list literal. Yeah. That's good.
I'm not sure if this is actually already supported. I would like, let's check the grammar. No, it's not supported.
Yeah. I'm not surprised.
Now it is.
Okay. So we take these in version one and then we put them just as on the backlog.
Yeah.
And if it's easy, we can integrate it in version one. If it's because there's really a lot that we still have to tackle. But I'm already experimenting with these kinds of things.
Yeah, and we would like there's a whole discussion there around context. I think that's because it's definitely
Yes,
something
that's
we want, but we have sort of separate mechanisms for that right now. But like in Apollo, we have the from context directive. But we explicitly designed that with the idea that we'd want to integrate it with require in the future.
yeah, and like if you look at that, it doesn't matter what syntax we choose here, but if context is kind of an object, then you can also have functions on that.
Yeah, we have to be
And
very
then
careful
then
about
it becomes really interesting, where
Yeah.
this could be even an extension that you have in the router or whatever that somebody could inject and that you can access through the context to do certain things.
No, I mean, it's just that this is
No,
very,
Pascal, this is just stuff I'm
very
playing
implementation
a
driven,
bit
right?
with.
So we
Yeah.
would have to be very careful of putting anything into the specification because that's the driver of innovation. We could say that there is a context object, but there might be whatever you put on there is implementation specific. Like
Yes. The
their
only thing
very
that has
own-
to work, Pascal, is that you need assignments for that. I don't say we have to specify what kind of functions you have to have on the context, right? We just need to be clear on, okay, we have something like context. And then there is things like you can collect data from the current query context that you are in. That is something that we must have as a mechanism. And then whatever you put, like what I said with functions on there, that is what each
That's-
implementation can decide on.
that's already like a question when we have the discussion, like pushing stuff onto the context from the query context and so on. Question is this a feature which needs to be specified, or is this
Yes.
an implementation specific?
I mean,
Yes.
we do have some sort of specific semantics there. It's more like that dynamic scoping. Like you specify those context values, and they're dynamically filled based on the query path you take. That's one possible.
Yeah, we also like in our case it's called scoped context. The feature, and it's basically you can along your query path you can put something on a map.
Yeah.
And that is accessible. But like and this specific part, I know you guys can already do it with directives. So you annotate basically something and then it's available deeper in the tree.
Yeah.
And that specific part I think should go in the spec, not necessarily one, but
Yeah, I mean, I think those semantics make sense, and you do want sort of an explicit way to indicate where that happens. But there's probably more discussion needed to encode the rules and come up with something that everyone's happy with.
Yeah.
So
Okay, let's go. To where were we? Yeah, okay, that's a field selection map. I create 2 issues for that, and then we can track that we have the syntax, the list syntax in there. Maybe we should also, or I think if we have the list assignment syntax finally there, this one, I think then it's also very clear why we have it. I mean, we can
yeah.
still write some reasoning about how this is a merge of these 2 parts of GraphQL in a single syntax. Just to explain a bit why this syntax is how it is.
Yeah.
But as soon as we also have this, I think the list syntax just makes sense without any explanation. Okay. Okay, so Pascal, I went through the issue board a bit, and we tagged a lot more, but we made for today's discussion, and that's optimistic, I think. Just a couple that we have enough. Let's start with this one. And I paste it into the chat. Give me a second. Okay.
But isn't this related to interface object as well?
Yes, yes,
Shouldn't
yes,
we
yes.
tackle those together?
Nope. That's
Okay, explain it, Pascal.
let me. Okay, it could be. I think we can group this under, like, you can add a label interface object. Then we find everything related to interface object and remove the discussion label. One thing that would be good to just reiterate again, what's the expected merge semantic at the moment? Is it, I have to read the spec again. Did we implement it with union or intersection or must match when an interface spans multiple services at the moment?
I think neither. Because I think it really, like, we look at the satisfiability, I think. So an object can be implemented across services, like different subsets of fields could be implemented in different services. And I think that would also be true of the interfaces.
But is it actually interface object? Because, well, technically you can have, if you have an
No,
interface.
it's not necessarily interface object, but that sort of simplifies the
Yeah,
making a
because-
change.
I think
Because
that
over here you could have, like, you know, a subgraph A with interface, right? And you have implementations there, and then you have subgraph B with interface that adds more stuff to it, right? But then you again implement the same type. With the interface object, yes, it's more pain in the ass to do that, but technically you could get it working without it, right?
Oh yeah, no, definitely. Yeah.
the current interface behavior, at least in Apollo composition, is to merge, or when we merge, it does union of all the fields, and it's left the satisfiability to make sure that it actually can be all the satisfied when you do the union.
Yeah, I just checked the composite one as well, and we also do it with union. So they realign. For each, let field names be the set of all field names and types is the instances of all the interfaces across all the source schemas. And then we just let fields be the set, and then we merge the output fields. So all of the fields which are defined in one of the interfaces end up in the output.
Yeah.
So
But that is only the first stage, right? Like satisfiability is what ultimately
Yes,
ensures that merge actually makes sense.
Yeah.
so what do we do with this one? Drop it from V1 or?
Yes.
Okay, then discussion is gone.
Easy. Let's just do that with the other ones too.
Okay. This one is from Martin, and it's about what we gonna tackle around execution. And I
I
think
was so young back then. Still had my hair.
It's the same.
and was high. And this, yeah, this is about basically how much we specify on execution, no?
Yeah.
And I think we have since settled on that we define the plan options, but not the full execution.
I think so. Yeah.
Draft specification in the observer currently refers of composing a federated schema and outlines algorithms. We could refine that in outline the core algorithms, because plan options is basically a core, like it's not all of it, but it's the core planning algorithm.
But I think we've put that under like as an implementation detail of satisfiability, right? It doesn't
Yeah.
really specify how execution happens. Like we don't enforce the use
Yes,
of a query plan.
but yeah, but we have an execution chapter that refers to this as how this could work. And like there are some descriptive work, some descriptions around execution that basically tell you, okay, you could implement it with resolvers, a bit explain that, and then also refer to the plan options as a way to plan. So I don't know if we want to call it
I'm
out
writing a
here.
reply and close the issue. Moment. I'm writing a reply and then I will close this issue.
Okay. Yeah, it's just about because this is should we change the introduction a bit to clarify outlines algorithms for executing graph queries on the federated schema effectively by using query plans.
Yeah. So
We
I think
could
that was the part I was responding to. Like I'm not sure if that's still in the current spec text.
Yes, because like I haven't rewritten the introduction. Query. There.
Oh yeah.
So we could revise that slightly.
I would just, I mean, if you just remove by using query plans,
Okay.
that might
Yeah,
be
then
enough.
it's that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's do that change, and then Pascal, take the issue. So don't close it, and I.
Do a refresh.
Okay, you did it. Okay, awesome. And then I'll take that as triaged. Okay. And let's refresh. Let's quickly. I posted that in the chat. Ah, yeah. This is more about semantics. At the moment, when we talk about in the spec about the directives, we use often string scalars. This makes it very simple. Let me go, for instance, to override, right? This from is a string. There is no semantics about name of a schema. It's just a string. We also have that for a couple of others. The question is, should that be semantic scalars that, for instance, are called schema name or whatever? Is that right,
I mean,
Pascal?
that makes sense to me, but it also means that we need to clarify the semantics. So, for instance,
Yeah.
for override, like the way we use it in Apollo, like we have the notion of a subgraph name.
Yeah.
And
I don't
thought
think
that
that's necessarily part of this spec yet.
I thought we actually were talking about trying to include that this
Yeah.
name in the side of the schema, right? Somehow.
Yeah.
I think
That-
I vaguely remember that
That is
conversation.
true.
I don't remember where it
That
went.
is true. There are two options here. So my plan to get in the core spec, but we will not get it into this core spec, is that we have something. At the moment, you have a schema here, and it would be very nice if we could have here the name. And then the semantics would be clear about how a GraphQL name is defined, right? Because every schema could just say, this schema is named like this. And we require each schema document to have this name specified. And then you don't have to track extra metadata somewhere. It's just part of GraphQL. So that is option one, right? We could also, we must fall back to a directive. Because even if we get this into a spec, it takes at least 2 years until it's there.
Yeah.
I
Yeah, and
mean,
I think if we want to get this into the spec, there's probably more to consider that goes with it, like namespacing, for instance, to bring that up again.
Yeah, but like this is also namespacing is also, I think, separate from a schema name, because that is a much broader scope that you have there, namespacing.
Oh no, definitely. But what I mean is, if we are introducing the concept of a schema name to GraphQL, we probably don't want it to be a simple name.
You think about something like Uber.
For example, if that's
as an
yeah.
example, could also
Yeah.
be a different syntax. I'm
Yeah.
not bothered about that, but kind of a namespace name. Yeah, but that's what I mean. Like if you introduce that, like, do you have it for fields? Like it touches more.
I would say so, but that's a whole separate design discussion.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, from my experience, how folks name their subgraphs, they're generally, well, it's a services thing, right? So they generally use like dashes to separate stuff. So that would fit with the directive, but that would be harder to do in actually just a schema syntax. But yeah.
Yeah, that would be the second thing we could introduce, and we have to align on a name here. Could be schema name, and then you could have dashes or whatever. If it's a GraphQL name, like in GraphQL, we have very specific semantics about names, right? They couldn't have dashes. But as soon as we put that in a directive, we can have everything. But what I think would be very nice if that we could co-locate all the information that we need in the composition into the schema. And that means we some kind need a notion of a name for
Yeah.
the schema in the specification, in the schema document.
So
Might
Yeah.
be easier to just
So-
leave them as strings for now.
I was just gonna say that because like if we're adding that to the GraphQL spec is gonna take a while, right? And trying to figure
Yeah.
out the
Like-
semantics of what is the schema name. Definitely not for the V1. I would say that's
But we do need to
No.
say something about it, and that's sort of that like whether we choose string or a more specific scalar. I don't think that's really the issue. The issue is that we haven't clarified what a schema name is and how you specify
Yeah.
it as part of this spec.
Yes, that's the one thing.
And we can say
And-
it's implementation dependent. I mean, that's always an option.
Yeah, but the nice thing, if we get it into the SDL, and I'm not worried about how we get it in here. So just to clarify, this guy here, that is at least 2 years before that would be in any GraphQL server, because we would need to get it into the draft state on the core spec and whatsoever. So this is not a short-term solution. This is what we could do very quickly. And it would be nice because you could, from a GraphQL server, just export the schema, and everything is there for composition. Otherwise, you always have to either with a JSON document or into the composition tooling, you have to pass in this information.
Yeah.
Small detail, but would give a lot of convenience for the user if we have that. So we should think about if we want to specify that. I think we should. Like we should specify the schema name, what the schema name is and why we need it. And I think we should have it as a directive. Could also be that we have a broader directive like add schema or some, I don't care, where we can add other stuff in the future. Doesn't have to be that specific like schema name.
We have the capabilities coming up, maybe.
Yes, I also thought about that. I will check with Benji how sure we
is
are.
the schema name a capability? That's kind of like
We had a discussion about that last time, like because the capabilities as they are defined, or at least in the examples, it's sort of mixed service and schema concerns.
True.
Yeah, also defer or the defer version, the proposed the proposal version is in there and so stuff like that. There's also like there's also execution behavior in like null propagation, which kind of if you think about it, is not a service concern but a GraphQL executor concern.
Yeah, and the schema concern even.
Yeah, you're right. So there's that. So I think we could park our stuff there if we wanted to. But again, this is not supported by any GraphQL server yet. So I think we need to fall back. Even if we say, okay, you can in future specify it there.
Yeah.
So we should just add a new source schema directive, schema name. That is the path of least resistance, right? But
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think the path of least resistance is saying that schema name is implementation dependent, and that we won't specify a mechanism in this first version.
we could also go around this way, right? And then each implementation has to decide how it where it comes from and how to pass it in.
Yeah.
I mean,
So I think override is the only place where the schema name is used, right?
well, I mean,
Yeah, it's also other things
Apollo
like when you
goes-
compose, you need to know it, right? You need to know it for the
in the supergraph documents, you also need to know it. So it's
yeah.
Well, sure, but the supergraph document is not part of the spec.
no, yeah, I agree. But I mean, like, if you want to,
In the
is
composition you need it.
is if we think that schema name is something that all implementations have to come up with in their own way, because it's required for A, tooling, B, a supergraph document, which many implementations will have, C, the composition in general, then it might be worth adding it to add a very basic layer of compatibility. Like, because if you don't use any fancy features of Fusion and you don't use any fancy features of Apollo Federation, and you don't use any fancy features in GraphBase, the subgraph documents could be exchanged with each other. But if all three of them have very own definitions of how to pass in the schema name, which is essential for these implementations, then it's actually not so interchangeable. So
Yeah, I mean,
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I mean, I'm not arguing against standardizing this, but I don't think the argument really holds because
it's
the
single information.
only place schema name is used in the spec is in overrides. Like for all other purposes, like you would use like vendor specific tooling to like upload your schema, and that could include like naming it.
Yeah, it's like
True.
my
There's
thing, my usability thing is like, let's say you have a folder and you just throw a couple of schemas in there, then you
yeah.
could just say compose. No other information is needed. Like from a usability standpoint, this would be just nice. You export it, you throw it into you throw the files at the tool and it would compose. No other information is needed as an input apart from the schema documents. It's not as big of a deal that if you want to use a subgraph from Fusion and go with that to Apollo, that you detail this information a different way, right? It's a single information. That's also true, right? So you could just say, in Apollo, we pass it into the console. In Fusion, we have to have the directive. So it's not a big deal. That's true, but it could give convenience. I would put it in this bucket. So it's not crucial. It's not crucial for the spec to succeed that we have it. What we have to agree on is a bit about the structure of a name and the semantics, I think.
Yeah. Well, I mean, but like there's something before that, which is like, do we agree override from is the right capability or the right behavior? Because that like that's the only reason we have schema name in the spec, and it is sort of a weird workaround that we introduced for basically migration purposes.
Yeah.
But it introduces like a dependency on another specific schema or service that we don't have anywhere else in the spec.
This has this has a second thing to it. Wait, proposal optional comma, no, this we had discussed. Is it extra staged? It's not in here, but I reviewed it today. So there is also a rule around what happens when the schema name that you have in override is no longer existing. what is the behavior behind that, right? So there are a couple of unknowns behind override, right?
Yeah, and I think I mean the question is like, do we feel it belongs in the spec or in V1 of the spec, or is migration something that we want to tackle separately, and maybe we can come up with a better solution than like the override mechanism we have currently?
Do you want to? So we took override into the spec because of Apollo Federation, right? For compatibility.
Yeah. I mean, it is being used, and I think Derek and Sachin might have better ideas of how widespread their use is, but it seems like it's something that we can't just forget about.
Is
But
is
it's
that
always
is that something you would be open for change also? Like I
mean,
never
we
argued
won't be
against it.
removing it from Apollo Federation, but I think it's fine to not specify it as part of the spec because we only want to standardize the things we're happy with. And I think migration is an area where we might be able to come up with better solutions in a future version. But like I think Sachin was about to say something.
Go ahead.
Yeah, we definitely have been thinking about potentially other options in the future. So we do plan on still supporting override just to make sure folks can still use it, but we might have something better in the future too. So and there's usage of this and also the progressive overrides version, I think, of this um amongst our customers. So
Which is a better solution than just override.
yeah.
What is that? What is the better
Pro-
solution?
What we call is the progressive overrides, because the override is like all or nothing. So you shift traffic immediately.
Ah, you mean with
That's-
an indicator how much you want to override it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I want
that's
to
like,
override it, but just a tiny bit.
Yeah,
well,
like
it's
1%,
how you
The
shift
first three
traffic,
characters.
right?
No, it's about traffic, right? 50% of the traffic override.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
isn't that something that you would configure in a rule in something like Apollo Studio?
Currently, there isn't a way to do it indirectly in Apollo Studio, but Router does have a way of doing this. So you can use Launch Directly or some feature flagging service to integrate into Router that provides whether you should use one field versus another.
Right.
Field right.
You actually can switch the feature flag or A/B testing and things like this dynamically on.
Yes.
Okay, that's interesting.
That's within the router itself.
How many big schema customers are using that? Because that also sounds super dangerous.
Netflix would
Suddenly,
say,
when suddenly you have a completely different execution plan, which takes down production.
I mean, that's why you don't switch it all at once.
Yeah, you don't just flip it to 100%, gradual traffic. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we probably could take it out.
I wouldn't mind, but I would like when we take something out, I also want to have some feedback from Kamil on this. But
Yeah.
in general, I don't mind. Like in my original idea, the core spec didn't include it, and I also think that like there's a lot of potential where you want to actually dynamically like you do in Cloudflare, where you can say now we send 2% of the traffic there and 2% of the traffic there, and then we dynamically scale up when we see it's stable.
So
right, and then
to clarify, right? So or maybe to reiterate, so like we're considering dropping the overrides primarily because of the concerns about the schema name. That is like the only part that is actually different.
Well, it's
no,
more
that's that started it, but
that just started it. It's more like we're not sure if it's worth adding override when we more or less know that there's better solution. We just didn't have the time to come up with a good solution.
Okay, fair enough.
Like,
but the
it's such a
schema
simple-
naming is also like a consideration, because over here we don't. That's the only place that actually implies this some schema name formats.
No,
Yeah, I mean, if we drop this, we don't have to
we have to
decide on schema naming.
Yeah, so we don't have to decide where it comes from, but there is, I mean, in the composition, isn't there that we have schema name in the algorithms
I
somewhere?
don't think so. I mean, you have to uniquely be able to uniquely identify the individual.
I'm not sure. I was always under the impression that, but I'm also implementation blind because I know what we implemented.
Yeah, I think it's in the, so you do need a unique identification of the schema, right? So that's in the
Yeah.
supergraph. You have to know
Yeah,
where
but this,
stuff goes, but I'm not sure if we're actually calling it anywhere.
yeah, we are not calling it
here.
out, I think. I will have a look, but yes, we could, if we drop that out. Let me review that. If this is the only part we have that.
Oh, I think we were talking about there was like one issue that I opened a long time ago was do you have a predictive merge order of the schema? So that's like we sorted by names,
Yes,
right?
yes.
But that's
You're right,
but
and that is the name.
It's as long as you can have a predictive order of how you merge the schemas, I think that doesn't have to be name. You just have to have something that's predictable.
Yeah, and that's the thing I meant. Like we, I think, described somewhere that we are ordering it by schema name to have a predictable merge order.
That's not in the spec yet because that was not added in. It was just an issue, but yes.
Yes, but that's where I thought,
Yeah.
okay, we need it in, and then from there followed the discussion that where is the schema name even coming in?
Yeah. Yep.
But that's the second thing where schema name comes up, right? That you have a predictable merge order, that it's not random. For instance, you couldn't hash the documents in order by this, because every time a document changes, it would also change in the order.
Yeah.
So you have something for your system where the outcome is predictable.
Okay, I have to run.
Same here. Yeah.
Yeah.
But,
Okay. Let's think about it. I'm pinging Kamil on this, and then we can make a decision on that next week.
good. Sounds good.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Great progress. Then let's continue with the issues next week.
Okay.
Yep. All right. See you next week.
See you. Bye bye.